Hi, Gabby. Welcome to the Surthriving podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So glad that we found time to do this. I open every episode with one question. You can answer it any way that you feel comfortable. Are you surviving or thriving?
I think it depends on the day, to be honest. But today we're in surviving mode, so I'll lead with that. Today we feel like we're surviving.
Okay. I appreciate the honesty and I will mirror that. Today specifically, I feel like I'm also surviving. So
Yeah.
solidarity.
We're here, right? We go in ebbs and flows, especially as a business owner. Like you never know what the day's gonna bring. So, 2 days ago I was thriving, then had a crash and burn moment. I'm like, cool, well tomorrow we'll be thriving and it'll be all good.
Yeah, exactly. And I appreciate the honesty. That's what I'm like trying to get at with doing this podcast is that we're all human. Life happens, shit happens.
Yeah.
And, some days are great and some months are great and then others are not. So,
Or even
I'm,
years. Like, to be honest,
yeah,
last year was a dumpster fire for me. So I just, like it varies, but
yeah, exactly. I think the whole world could probably relate to that a couple of years ago.
yeah.
So I'm so excited to cover many different things. I feel like you're just a woman that does it all, and has her hands in a lot of different things. So I'm excited to kind of like pick your brain. But for listeners, could you just share who Gabby is, your story, and then the story of just like the Corporate Quitter podcast and that whole business?
Yeah, so I'm Gabby Ianniello. I am a corporate quitter, hence the name of my podcast, Corporate Quitter. I quit my corporate job after about 6 years in New York City on Wall Street in 2021. And podcasting started as like a side hobby, basically in August of 2020, when I was like really frustrated with my job and was looking for something to kind of take the edge off because I had gone to just lengths of like drinking and avoidance and escapism with my job. And I was like, okay, this isn't cute. We need to find something that fulfills us. And podcasting through a Craigslist ad led me down this rabbit hole of now pursuing what is now Corporate Quitter, which has become basically like an education media company, if you will. It basically helps people to quit their 9 to 5s, more specifically be really working with podcasters as well as like freelancers and creatives and things like that. So we're only 3 years in, which is crazy, but we're still kind of like figuring out our niche, so to speak. But I haven't had a job since, so it's been working out pretty good.
Yeah, what a crazy 180. I mean, Wall Street from someone who is also from the Northeast. I mean, it's a different world up here. The hustle and
Yeah.
bustle, the rat race, it is so real. And I think unless you've experienced it, I've never worked on Wall Street, but unless you've just like experienced New York City and have like worked there or like been there enough to understand the culture, it's exhausting.
It is.
It's a
And like,
lot. Yeah.
yeah, in my younger years, I appreciated it because I had so much energy and like just so much zest for life. Like, I wanted to experience all those things. And honestly, I wanted to be taken seriously. So it was like perfect to be thrown into those things. And my background actually is in teaching. So for a while, I wasn't even accepted on Wall Street because they were like, oh, you have a teaching degree. What am I going to do with you? And I was able to kind of whittle my way in. So I felt really proud and excited to be on Wall Street and like playing with the big boys, so to speak. But yeah, after again deciding to quit and things like that, I actually now live in Austin. I just wanted a slower life, and just kind of after doing that for so many years and pulling 60-hour weeks and things like that, I was like, yeah, no, I want my laundry to be in my apartment. I don't want to battle
Oh,
roaches
yeah.
every day. Like none of that. No, no, no. Like easy. I want ease.
In regards to education, did you get a degree in education?
Yeah,
What, like,
yeah. So I have a
okay.
dual degree in general ed and special education. And like a lot of people graduated. And even though I had like a solid degree, I couldn't find a job. And that's when I started to take to like side hustles and things to try to whittle my way into education, and was like
Yeah.
thinking about graduate school and all those things. And just every door was closing in my face. So it was kind of like, all right, it's not easy for me. So this must not be the path anymore. And that was like my
Mm,
official quitting, or my quitter journey, was like actually saying no to teaching and basically pursuing business/corporate.
yeah. Well, good for you for finding a way out or a way around it or through it, honestly.
Yeah.
And teaching has become a lot different in the last few years, as we all know. And so
Yeah.
it's definitely a totally different field now. So I imagine that working on Wall Street and living in the Northeast and the whole, I just keep thinking of like Wolf of Wall Street, like the whole
So,
culture, like up
okay, it's funny you
there.
say that because my very first corporate job, I shit you not, was like almost exactly like Wolf of Wall Street. Like it was a lot of drinking, a lot of
Oh
partying,
my
and I actually ended
gosh.
up 3 months later leaving because I was like, I can't grow here. Like this was fun for like a week, but like I didn't sign up for not only for like a crappy salary, but I didn't sign up to be, again, part of like a frat house. So I ended up
Yeah.
leaving. But yeah, I got that experience too. That was really fun.
Jesus. Talk about like being in a movie scene.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's
mean, again,
wild.
like fun for a second, and then you're like, okay, we need to be serious, and this isn't the place.
Yeah. Something I want to touch on with your corporate job kind of being your like image or who you are. I think a lot of the times people are very quick to introduce themselves like, hi, my name is Lisa. I am XYZ, or I'm a nurse, or I'm this or that. And it's very easy to describe yourself as what you do, but not who you are. And so could you like describe who Gabby is outside of the corporate quitter?
Yeah. So actually, I like to paint myself as a creative ding dong. That's like the thing. For right now, at least this season of life. And I mean, the great thing about being an entrepreneur is that I get to pivot whenever I want. So I'm a painter. I love ecstatic dance. I'm a weird little hippie in Austin who loves my matcha lattes and journaling. I mean, I'm sure from the bio that I sent you, I've done a lot of different things, not just in the terms of
Yeah.
like my hobbies and stuff, but like from corporate quitter and doing podcasting to experimenting with selling feet pics on the internet for research purposes for the quitters. Like I've done so much stuff. It's wild.
That's amazing. I love that. We'll have to learn more about that later.
Yeah.
And you often talk about, I know about like this like highlight reel and everyone, right? Like social media, it's so easy to be like, people have this crazy awesome life. So what would you say are like the biggest differences of being, on Instagram or having the corporate quitter and doing this whole content thing, but versus like actual reality of it that you live?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I think because of the rise of TikTok, there's been this like push for authenticity. Like people, we can smell bullshit. Like it's very difficult to now be kind of an influencer who's strictly that kind of sexy sort of like painting
Yeah.
that lifestyle. Like we just know it's not possible. Even if you have all the money and all of that, like there might be an issue with your relationship or your health, or like there's something that you're not disclosing. And again, there are privacy issues with that, and I've experienced that by oversharing. But I think to a point, like we all can pick up on the vibes, so to speak. And so there's this new wave of creators who are basically taking, I don't want to say like the rising, the seats at the top kind of for that reason, but I think we're finding this displacement of power, if you will, or influencer power of people who are actually willing to dive into those details. And so I think one of the differences of why I had success as a podcaster, because it really is a competitive landscape, is for the authenticity factor. So when I first started doing this, it became a documentary process. So I was actually documenting the things I was doing and experimenting with. And there were a lot of failures and fuck ups over the years for that reason. I mean, I've lost thousands of dollars. I've made the wrong mistakes in terms of investing in coaches and consultants and products, and,
Yeah.
sold even the wrong products, right? Experimented to validate an idea that was complete garbage. And so I think people like to see the humanness, because especially in business, very rarely do businesses make it out alive. And so again, I think there's something to be said about playing the long game here. So instead of painting the sexy like IG versus reality thing where things are perfect and dandy, that maybe gives you 2 years, 3 years of runway, eventually you're going to get called out on your bullshit. That's just kind of how life works. So I would rather play a 10-year game knowing that maybe the first 3 years I have to be really authentic and raw, which I've done. And honestly, I've gained a lot of respect for it. And so moving forward, business looks really bright for me for that reason, but it also, I think, connects with your audience a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think especially like women in their 30s, we're in this really like trialing like time, and people just want to see realness. They want to be like related and validated. That's what I've noticed like in
Yeah.
my community or friends. People just want to be like seen and heard, and I'll put myself in that bucket too. Like you just want to be wanted by something that's like similar, if that's like the best way to explain it. And so did you find that once you started kind of being more vulnerable and authentic and stuff, even through the mistakes or whatever, that your audience kind of met you halfway with that?
Yeah. And yes. And so actually a year ago, it's funny because I'm entering in right now into like a bit of a crossroads phase again with business and just life. And this seems to happen around this time of year, regardless of me being a corporate quitter or not. And last year, I actually had a particularly really hard winter. And so last year was really, or 2 years ago, 2022, was really when I started to push the envelope with oversharing. So I was sharing the money woes, the health woes, like literally everything on a day-to-day basis, breakups, everything. And I mean, I was like sobbing on the internet. And so at my lowest low, when I actually got hit with a health ailment and had to pull out my 401k early to take care of that, which was like something I never would have expected to do,
Yeah.
taking my retirement out at 29 to fix a health ailment. Like I'm not 65. And so I was distraught, and especially with business still kind of working itself out. And I was surprised to find that my audience actually rose up to support me. I mean, I had people that I never spoke to, followers of me, finding my Venmo to send me money to get a latte to take care of my mental health,
Oh,
like people reaching out, calling, leaving voicemails, like people checking in that I've never spoken to but have been around for a while. And to me, that was like, okay, I did my job then, as like building an audience of people who are companions, even if they aren't opening up and I'm the one oversharing, they feel safe enough and they kind of see me as a friend that they're willing to reach out and be that kind of soundboard when I need it, even though I'm most of the time the soundboard for them.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is so warm. What a warm answer.
Yeah. Well,
I love that.
there's like also with the authenticity and everything that's going on, I'm finding with also we have a loneliness epidemic right now in America. Like people
Oh
are
yeah.
lonely. And so there's this rise of, yes, the authenticity, but also companionship. So you see a lot of people who they're not talking at the camera like they would years ago in influencing and things like that in online videos. It's a lot more like, hey, come with me. Like it's almost like you're FaceTiming a friend. It becomes
Yeah.
so real and vulnerable. And like it feels like you're actually getting to know someone, even though you maybe have never spoken to them. And I think that's a solution that's really just, it's helping people survive in this time of things are weird, right? We're on the brink of World War III.
Yeah.
Finances aren't good. Like we need a little bit of love in this world. And so if that's the way we're going to do it and people are responding well to it, why not?
Yeah, it's so true. And it's important to be authentic and to be yourself. I think no matter like who you are, there is always someone out there like you, or maybe having a similar experience or whatever it is. Or, people always say like in a podcast, like, oh, for the listeners, what would you advise them? Whatever. Like, I just always think that there's someone on the other side of that who's like, oh, I
Yeah,
can understand that or that topic. And to your point of with like money and where the world is right now, I always joke like eggs are $10. Like, what is happening? Like,
I
I have no
know.
idea what is going
I know.
on.
It's like it's actually a little well, it's almost funny because I'm like all bets are off. There are no rules anymore. Like I don't care
Yeah.
by playing by the rules because apparently the people who are in charge who are determining prices aren't playing by the rules either. So like it's kind of like you ever see that meme where it's like the guy on the bus and there's one of him looking at the wall and one looking out into the mountains and there's like
Yes.
two sides of the same thing where it's like, oh, life has no meaning, and the other one's like life has no meaning. So I'm trying to see the approach from that angle, but it's definitely hard when you're like, how do we talk about surviving like and thriving, how do you thrive in a world that where no one is surviving, like nothing is surviving down to
Yeah.
morals, traditions, nothing.
Yeah, 100%. And you might have just declared that as like the meme of this podcast. It's like one guy on one side of the bus is surviving and the other side is thriving. But you mentioned something that I would love to touch on, just like the money screw ups, the
Mhm.
decisions and things that you made. So, like, how has your relationship with money changed from going from a stable income bi-weekly, I'll assume, corporate job where you just knew what you were making, you knew what you were going to get and how that was going to bucket into your rent, utilities, food, whatever it may be. How has your relationship like with money changed in regards to like leaving the corporate world?
Yeah. So obviously going from a steady paycheck to not knowing when the bills, when I'm going to get paid is really, really stressful in the beginning. And even today, it can be really stressful, especially when I'm trying to get a leg up on finances, right? Rebuild that investment portfolio that I had to take out early. Like it kind of feels shitty. But at the same time, it's been really, really cool to honestly, a lot of the money conversation has been around worthiness and deservingness and just
Yeah.
recognizing that like, oh, wow, I have skills that maybe my corporate job or my employers or my manager didn't see, but people out in the world who are witnessing what I'm doing are willing to throw the same amount of money, if not more, than my corporate job without working all these hours and doing all this grueling work and like being in my zone of genius. So it's been really cool to see and validate my worthiness in the sense of money of like, oh, there are no bounds to what I can make. It's just more of a limiting belief thing. But I mean, I'm entering my third year, like I said, and now I feel like I'm finally cleaning up my finances. That's how long it's taken. Also, because
Yeah.
like many people who want to be quitters, I didn't have any economic background other than I worked on Wall Street, great, but that as an assistant, I'm not learning the ins and outs of how to work a portfolio or even how to manage
Yeah.
money. I barely know it. I mean, the system is rigged for a reason. It's supposed to be confusing. And so I never got an education on how to run business. This is the first year I'm actually opening up a business account and having business credit. Like I'm just
Yeah.
finally
Yeah.
getting those pieces together. So That's the reality of it. People who are saying, "Oh, I just decided to do my business and made 10K." Like there are those scenarios, but I notice that a lot of those people, they come with a lot of like trade-offs. So for example, I have a friend who right out the get-go, within a month, she was making a lot of money, like money she's never seen before, like fuck you money. But she's working 60 hours a week. She's working
Yeah.
more than she did in corporate. And even though it's great, like you're building your own baby, like I made it. Again, we go back to the 10-year game. I would rather be authentic and vulnerable and it take longer to establish credibility. I would much rather it take 10 years to build up to that fuck you money, if you will, right? Like the 10K months, whatever it is, 100K months that this friend is making, but be able to sleep in without an alarm clock and feel like my nervous system is regulated. So that's just something that
Yeah.
I wasn't willing to compromise on. So there are trade-offs with that for sure. But I mean, I
Yeah.
just hit my first 10K month in December, which was really exciting. So now I have to maintain it, which is its own battle,
Yeah.
but it's been, the money conversation has definitely been evolving and growing.
Yeah. And congratulations. Celebrate every win, no matter what it looks like,
Thank
because
you.
thriving versus surviving, right? Like today we're both surviving, but December you were thriving, I'll assume. And so it can look different. And like I have said earlier, like that's what I'm trying to get out here is that
Yeah.
like not everything is like rainbows and butterflies. And I've just always like reflected on my life, especially in the last year where I'm like, whoa, like those couple of years, like I like didn't have it together, but I had it together in those ways. And like now I
Yep.
don't, and the opposite. Like it's like we're all just on a spinning rock. That's what I say to ground myself.
Oh, yes. I also have gone through the habit of I journal every single day and I'll actually at the top of each page, I try to, sometimes I forget, but I try to mark the day, like if it's a good day, like a neutral day or a bad day. And at the end of the year, I like to go back and count how many good days and bad days and neutral days I had to really say, okay, if I had more good days than bad days, we can't really say it's a bad year because generally speaking, my
Yeah.
mood was pretty good or this good thing happened or like whatever it is.
I love that. That's such a good tip. I feel like I would probably benefit from doing that or like some type of like jar thing. Like put a piece of paper in the jar every day and be like, it was a good day and like write the date or something like that. I'm not a big journaler, but I can take a snippet of that. I love
You
it.
could though, like if you get like, you know how they have those little pads that have like the little green strips, the yellow strips, the pink strips, like they're usually like sticky tabs
Yes.
or something. If like on a
Yes.
good day you put you crumple up a green ball and put it in there, and then you can visually see how your year is
Oh,
going. That might work. Yeah. I also do, it's
love
silly,
that.
but I call it my magic jar. It's just like a jar that sits next to my desk. And anytime I have a worry, like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to pay this bill, or like the money's not gonna come in, or like the problem with the boyfriend isn't gonna work out, or like whatever it is, I just write it on a piece of paper and I'm like, throw it in the magic jar. Like it's gonna figure itself out. Someone's gonna whether it's me, the cosmos, like I'm putting it out there, it's gonna be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
not my
quite,
problem.
quite literally like put it away. And it's like,
Yeah.
again, 95% of the stuff that you worry about doesn't even happen.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
something I'm still learning. What are some tips or wisdom that you would share about creating direction, like intentional direction in your life?
It kind of sounds counterproductive, but I wish in the beginning, and even when I was in corporate, but I didn't see the value in it, so I never embraced it. But I wish I emphasized and prioritized creativity and play 10 times more than I actually did. So we're conditioned to think that play and creativity is something reserved for either children or when you're like retired or you've earned it, right? You put in the 60
Yeah.
hours. Okay, now I deserve it. Or okay, I've established the nest egg or like whatever it is. But the reality is that the creativity and the play isn't just for the sake of playing. It's for the sake of actually nervous system regulation, which is required to heal and get those downloads or aha moments that you're searching for. So a lot of times when we look for clarity, especially me in corporate a couple years ago, even I would stare at the computer and will myself while my eyes feel like they're bleeding because they're so bloodshot to try to figure an answer of like what my path is or what's my next idea or what am I supposed to do? What job am I supposed to do? I'm in this long
Yeah.
list of what I'm supposed to do. And I don't think ever I've come up with a good idea. I may have come up with ideas, but they weren't the idea or the path or the thing that actually moved the needle. So it's actually in those mundane routine tasks like taking a shower, going for a walk, driving, painting, doing things that are almost on autopilot so your brain can take a break, right? There's no active tasks that you need to figure out. Like you choosing,
Yeah.
oh, am I going to do the red crayon or the orange crayon isn't quite the same of like, oh, how am I going to create a business plan and do this? Like it's a completely different sort of system you're doing. Even working in Excel sheets and work, like, no, no, no. Go move your body and do something that's outside so your subconscious can actually take a break and create space for you to have those aha moments.
Yeah. Oh, that is so important. And thank you for sharing that because it's so easy just to get wrapped up in the 9 to 5 and log on, do what you can and log off. And that it's finding a balance between like, okay, I have to do this job, but I have to do this too. And to like, for context, I have a background in like psychology and like human and child development, and the concept of play, I could like talk about this forever, but like the concept of play, you're right, is like judged or stigmatized to be made for children.
Yep.
But when you retire, right, like you said, but if you look internally, a lot of like how people heal themselves is like looking at their inner child and doing things that they like to do. And so if you think about it, right, like when people become adults and we're really good at sports, but now can't play that sport and don't know what to do and just have all this energy or whatever it may be. Like they become like marathon runners because they
Yep.
like played sports as kids, but this they like looked internally and really enjoyed moving their body physically or whatever it is. Play is not just for kids, and it's actually, I agree totally that it is like a nervous system healing thing. It's crucial. I think it's part of the important work of just being human. Like I said, I could talk about this all damn day.
Yeah.
But so with the big transition and kind of like the survival moment of being in the corporate world, is there anything that you do miss about the corporate world?
I would say the only thing that I really miss is on occasion, let's say like 20% of the time, it'd be really nice if someone told me what to do. But also, like,
Mm,
I like having my own schedule and stuff. It's just more of like when you have those moments of like, oh, I don't know what to do first in my business. I have all these ideas. What's the right step? How do we, like, for someone in corporate to be like, no, this is how we do processes, right? They kind of pump the brakes on a lot of stuff, which annoyed me, which is why I left. But like in business, you have to learn to trust yourself, which is like one of the key things that I wish I had known earlier. But again, you don't know until
yeah.
you're in it, that you make the best decisions that you can with the information you have. It'd be nice if someone was like, oh, these are the things we have to do to reach this KPI, reach the sale goal, whatever it is. And the other thing is actually like camaraderie, like actually being around people and leaving the house and putting
Yeah.
hard pants on, as they say, and like doing my makeup. Like it's really easy for me to like to lay around and not do makeup and like not see friends and whatever. But I've made it a habit really these past like 2 years or so to actually, the podcast is what helped me to create new business friends. So now I have a lot more friends in person here in Austin, as well as like sprinkled throughout the world digitally, to actually, make myself be social and have actual friend groups and routine things that I go to. And also just going to like yoga and things like that. But
Yeah.
it's those two aspects sometimes would be nice. But I mean, I feel like I could never go back. I tried actually during the summer. I danced with the idea for a second when a bank had offered me a job, and I was like, yeah, not worth it. I'm not, no, no, I'm not doing
Yeah,
that.
interesting. Yeah, it is such like the norm to work the 9 to 5. And I want any listener or anyone in my life who knows me, like, if you want to do that, that's fine. Like and we're not like sitting here saying that. I mean, I work a 9 to 5. This is just like a fun passion project. You can, like you can work the 9 to 5 if that is what you want to do and
Oh,
you're
nine to
happy. And
five's
a lot of people,
wonderful. Like it
yeah,
really is. Like I learned so much, and when in the jobs that I really enjoyed with the colleagues that I really enjoyed, like I loved it. I really did. The only thing that got me was the frustration around growth, because I'm a very ambitious person. So when I
yeah,
get capped on that, that to me annoys me, and even creativity wise, it annoyed me. But like corporate's great. I mean, it paid off my student loans because I was in corporate. I learned professionalism.
right.
I built a network. Like there is nothing wrong with having a job. And who's to say that 10 years from now, I get a job that ends up being something different. And maybe the 9 to 5 changes, which I think a lot of us are kind of rallying against. Is like, we don't want to be in an office. We don't want pizza parties. Just give us more money. Like all these things are
Yeah,
starting to take shape. So maybe if the model changes, I'd be open to it. But I mean, there's no shame. Even though I'm the corporate quitter,
yeah.
I don't shit on it. Like it's a great model and it works for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And what I'm hearing you say too, like, is you have choices.
Yep.
If you want to switch your 9 to 5 and do something different, I mean, that's what I did a couple years ago, and that's fine too. Like, if you want to totally quit and go out and venture and write 5 books, that's totally fine too. I think
Mhm.
now society is just kind of allowing the option,
Yes.
and more accepting of choice, and that people are going against like the norm of like our parents, like generation essentially. And you mentioned something earlier about like creativity and like structuring your day and how you wish you could have someone to like tell you what to do. And I wish I could just have that in my life as just like a life coach sometimes. But when you're kind of like stuck, you get out of that.
It's funny because again, we were talking about, oh, today's like a surviving day. Like I'm just getting by. So the past 2 days I've been definitely really stuck. Like not in the sense of I don't know what to do, but just very like low energy. My brain, I feel like I'm completely shut off. Like I just needed to rest. And I think that's the most frustrating thing is that, especially in a 9 to 5, you can't really take a rest day, right? It's just
Yeah.
kind of like when you have like your cycle and you're like dying of cramps, like you can't really take off. But the beauty of entrepreneurship is like I can, right? I can structure things around that. But again, going back to like play and creativity, like it really is the best tools for me when I am stuck. That, and of course, like when your body is calling for rest, you need to acknowledge it. It's just not
Yeah.
really accepted, which is super, super hard. But I would say also the stuckness, a lot of it is that the reason you're stuck is because you're avoiding something, which I hate to say. It's like what do they say? The magic is in the things that you're avoiding. And a lot of
Mhm.
times what you're avoiding and all of that can actually be down to just like you relinquishing control and just surrendering to the experience of being stuck. Like just saying, I'm stuck and this
Yeah.
is okay. Like if I'm
Yeah.
supposed to have clarity and understanding what I'm supposed to do, I would have it, but I don't. And there's a reason for that. And that's okay. Like trust
Yeah.
in yourself to say like, okay, this is actually part of the plan. Like if I had the tools or the resources or the money or like whatever it was, I actually would be going in the wrong direction. It's actually okay for me to not know where I'm supposed to go in because it's clearing out the murkiness or like the confusion, future, whatever it is. Like that's happened to me a bazillion times where like,
Yeah.
like I didn't have the money to do a certain project or something. And then turns out actually the project wasn't going to work out. Or later on the company went bust or something happened. I'm like, great. It like saved me the problem and the headaches later on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I have reflected within myself too. I think we just live in an instant gratification type of world.
Yes. Yeah.
We get the likes, we get the views, we get like the attention, whatever it is that I think we're so used to living in a world where we just get instant gratification. So then I'll speak for myself that even like when I feel stuck, I'm like, I wish I just had the answer. Like, I
Yep.
wish I just like literally knew what was on the other side of that. And sometimes that is so true what you said. Sometimes you're like, okay, I'm stuck and like, that's fine.
Yeah.
And like, it ends there.
Yep. And it's actually like part
Uh,
of the cycle. Like when you look at like when people say they're lost, there's actually 4 parts to a cycle. So it's you start at being lost, which means you actually to get unlost or find clarity, you have to go deeper into being lost, which means more exploration, more poking, more dead
yeah.
ends that you return back to the start to go down another dead end. Like there's a part of that process. The next phase after you finally have clarity is you find consistency, and then after consistency is intensity, right? Like you just keep doing things over and over again, you go hard, and then what ends up happening is you go back to lost, which means you
Yeah.
go back into exploration and pivoting and do like it's completely normal actually. Again, we've just demonized it because society wants you to work like a machine and we're human and that's not how we operate.
Yeah, 100%. And I can actually think of moments in my life as you were saying that where it looked like I was like thriving, but on the inside I was like surviving. And just because I was like hustling, 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 and then you like stop and you're like, wait a
Yeah.
second. And it's like the body keeps the score, right? And it like catches
Yep.
up to you and you're like, now I'm exhausted and I'm miserable and I hate what I'm doing.
It's
And
usually
you're
like
like,
that. Like when it looks
oh my
picture
God.
perfect on the outside is usually when like shit is the worst on the inside, which sounds terrible, but like my lowest moment, I had all the things, right? Like the boyfriend my parents loved, I had no debt, like I had like a brownstone apartment in Manhattan that I somehow got during COVID. It was like all these
Yeah.
amazing things, the credit score 805 credits, like all this stuff. And my parents were so proud that they would tell their friends, "Oh, my daughter has a job on Wall Street and she's doing this and this." And I was like, I am drinking White Claws because that was the big thing in 2020. I'm drinking White
Yeah.
Claws every single night just to go to sleep and not cry like I want to, whatever. Like that
Yeah.
is not healthy. And that was when I was probably the most lost in my life, yet it looked picture perfect. And that's why the Instagram versus reality thing is complete bullshit. Complete
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah, you're like, mom and dad, I'm so glad that you think I'm thriving, but right now I am not well. You're like, I'm not well. It's like, um, and so as being like an entrepreneur, a business owner, being like independent and all of that, I don't know if you have like a team or anything, but how do you like structure your days, your weeks? Like, what does that whole business model look like for anyone listening? Like, what advice that or like insight would you provide on that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because my first year in business, I was very rigid and structured. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., grind until 12, take like lunch, then do this, and then go to the gym at 6. Like I was very much in like the corporate 9 to 5, even though I was on my own doing whatever I wanted. And honestly, I got a lot done, but I burnt myself out, as many
Yeah.
people do in corporate. Didn't work for me. And so I had to embrace more of this like feminine flow. And so Then the year after that was more of like being in your flow. But of course, like you have to have a little bit of that masculinity of like do, do, do. So these
Yep.
past years I've been really focusing on like what days do we rest and what days do we flow and be creative and what days do we like sit down, do the work and all of that. And so honestly, I have stopped structuring my days, and I have loose routines of what I like. Okay, I know I do a morning sprint. That's when I'm the most creative. I know from like 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'm completely useless. Sometimes I get bursts of energy and cool, we're going to lean into that. But most of the time that's reserved for walking, sleeping, doing art projects, something like that, eating, lots of eating. And then after I have like a nighttime last minute, let's pump the last bit of creativity out. But in terms of like weekly and monthly things, like I actually kind of stopped doing that. I do more on quarterly and yearly basis goals and kind of setting parameters in that way. Because as an entrepreneur, things happen so quickly. And so for that reason, I can't really predict too far out. I have goals and I like to work backwards in the beginning of the year. So I have an idea like, oh, if I want to make this amount of money, this is what I have to sell and this is what I have to do. Like roughly, right? We always lean into the idea of something falling into our lap, which happens a lot of the time. But I mean, I basically, if I structure it too rigidly, I don't allow for magic. And that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is allowing for those back door, side door entry points. And so in corporate, you only really have a couple years where you can pivot things, right? When raises and promotions come around, maybe March, April, even like end of year, okay, we're like getting our bonuses. Maybe I'll pursue another job, but like you can't really, there's not a lot of workaround throughout the year, or just like in terms of structuring your goals and stuff like that. So I've been trying to figure it out, but I like having really loose ideas of how to do things. So I think sometimes there's beauty in not having rigidity in your routine and schedule, and even how you're going to do your goals to make for, again, those magical moments to happen. Because that's what makes entrepreneurship exciting, is like the crazy things that happen that wouldn't happen on a day-to-day basis or to the average person. So just a quick little example, but I try to acknowledge the intuitive pulls and be in flow as much as I possibly can while still having some parameters in place.
Of course, you have to have like some like, there's a lot of sand in the sandbox, but you have to have parameters around this. So you can't just like always be throwing sand everywhere. So for someone or a listener, for someone who's listening who maybe has a hard time with like downtime, like I know you said 1 to 4, like that you're not productive, like I already know that would spend me like put me in a spiral. Like how long did it take you to like be okay with like, okay, like I'm just like not productive from 7 to 9 a.m. Like I just know that.
I mean, I'm 3 years in and I'm still working on it. Like yesterday was what I call a 0 day, where like I literally couldn't function. Today was a little bit better, but yesterday was a 0 day, and I fought myself for probably the first half of the day. And then finally at the end, after having a good cry, I was like, okay, fine. I'm just not going to do anything. And then today I had like a great day. We're still in survival mode, but I got done all the things I needed to do. So I think it's testing small things like over time. So for example, I first started off with setting my alarm clock like a little bit later, and now I don't use an alarm clock. So like at first I'd be like, oh my God, what if I wake up at 9 and I don't do this and I can't do that and I miss this meeting and blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, no, I trust in my circadian rhythm and like the things that that I got enough sleep, that I ate well to do this on time and to schedule things right according to my calendar so that it abides by what's important to me. But in terms of downtime and things like that, again, like they say like wealth is built in bits, and I think rest as well as like nervous system support is also built in bits. I mean, everything's built in bits, right? The first step was going to be the steepest, so it's going to be the most uncomfortable, right? So setting that alarm from like 12 to 1:30, like you're going to force yourself to like turn off your phone, give it to your spouse, like tell them to lock it in the bathroom, don't touch it, go outside and touch a tree. Like it's going to suck, and then it's going to get easier. But I mean, I think that's, again, why I talked before about creativity and play. Like there are different ways to distract yourself, right? In the beginning, it's distracting, and then later on it becomes intentional because you find the benefit of it. But until you discover the benefits, you're going to like fight yourself tooth and nail on it. So like, it's a work in progress because every day is different for me.
Of course. And it's literally like exposure therapy, honestly. Like is like just like trying it and feeling the uncomfortableness and like sitting in that and like naming it and then being like, okay, like I'm fine actually, or like this worked or that didn't work, and then kind of like pivoting like accordingly. And so with all of this, like the pivoting and the money and all of that, like what's been like the hardest but best part? I guess twofold question. What's been like the hardest part of your journey, but what's been the best part?
It really has been like trust, which sounds so generic and corny, but I think especially as someone who, again, my background is not in business. My background is not in economics. Like I didn't go to Wharton Business School and then decide to launch a business. Like I'm a teacher, right? That's great for teaching online, but like I didn't understand these things. And so it was a learning. I was building the ship as it sails. And so the requirement of that is to trust myself. And in the beginning, I didn't trust myself. There was no confidence, and people can smell that, right? People trust in you as much as you trust in yourself, just as much people have confidence in you as much as confidence you have in yourself. So it's been a muscle I've had to flex. And the entrepreneurial journey it's been a really, really tough one, but it's also been so rewarding. But the trusting has been probably the greatest flexor I've ever had, where I now have such a huge tie-in with my intuition. Like I know what the right decisions are. I know the people who are supposed to be in the world and who aren't. I know when to say yes to the clients and who not to. And that took 3 years of flexing to do, and a lot of crazy stuff before that. Like before I even started entrepreneurship, I was diving into these things of like, how do I trust myself? And right, because after a while, you can't always ask mom and dad. You can't ask even people online to make the best decisions for you. They could be experts, but you know best. And so I've had to I've done like 10-day silent meditation retreats. I've done shrooms. I've done a ton of different things to flex that muscle. But even so, I'm surprised that even on a daily basis, I have those moments of like, how else can we have the invitation show up that we respond to with trust, right? Of like, okay, this is going to work out. I'm going to survive. We'll be fine. It's the sooner you can hack the confidence and kind of trusting point, I don't want to say the faster you'll make the money, but like the more that you'll be willing to take risks, which then lead to the success metrics that you're looking for, right? Determining what your metrics are and then chasing after them.
And to anyone listening, to like help sum that up, stop caring about what people think.
Hardest thing you'll do. Hardest thing
That's
ever.
Like, I think I've said that in every episode that I've done so far. Like literally to stop caring about what people think.
Yeah.
I have that like tattooed like inside my brain. So tying in like the whole theme of my podcast, Surviving versus Thriving, what would you say are the surviving and thriving moments of being an entrepreneur, hosting a podcast, having clients, doing the seminars, doing it all?
Yeah. I mean, surviving has been probably the first few years in business. Like this, again, last year was the first time I actually made recurring revenue. So my first 2 years were like, cool, we'll just like blow all the savings. And like, I was fully committed, right? I quit the job to do this full time. So I was like, I planned every possible aspect of how this could go wrong. I'm like, I will go through my savings, my retirement, and I will max out credit cards, but I will not give up on this. And so like, that is a survival tactic, right? And so to finally see money coming in, especially like I basically replaced my corporate income at this point, which is really cool. But again, that took 3 years. So that is a survival tactic of like, girl's got to feed herself. Like I can't live at home forever. I'm 30 years old. So that has been really survival based, and all the like limiting beliefs I had to shed and literally the physical things I had to go through to continue that purging was really challenging. But on the thriving side, I mean, the things that I've done and the things that I continue to do literally keep surprising me. Like not just in the sense of like cool clout in the sense of followers and the media tour that I've done and all these different really cool, I'm an award-winning podcaster now. I won an award last year. Like there are a lot of cool things that I've done and continue to do. But also just this fact of like what a privilege it is to be able to be in a place now where I don't have to set an alarm clock. No one tells me what to do. Although sometimes I want someone to tell me what to do. That's what I have a coach for. I have a consultant to tell me what to do. But like it really is a thriving moment where I get to pick and choose how my days go. In this case, I'd rather pick the poison of struggling my first few years to establish a foundation than a lifetime of a career that I feel like I'm kind of like not really flexing my muscle of what I could be capable of.
Yeah. And everything has a balance too.
There's always a trade-off and there's always a con that comes with every single avenue you choose, both in the career and just like life choices you make. But again, you pick your pain essentially. Pick your suffering.
100%. And I think being insightful within yourself has been a huge theme of our conversation, and learning who you are, trusting that confidence and doing things to gain that confidence, and, trusting the process, but also doing certain things to like hit goals that you want to have and be able to tangibly, make things come alive.
Yep.
Essentially. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. Any last words of inside wisdom, and where can people find you?
Yeah. I would just say if any of you have an itch for something and it keeps showing up, it's probably for a reason. So you should go ahead and itch it, even in a small way. And you can find me basically anywhere, Corporate Quitter, all my handles, my website, the podcast, obviously, all those good things.
Love it. Gabby, thank you so much for coming on the Surthriving podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for taking the time on a surviving day. I'm throwing thriving vibes into your universe and into your 2024. I really hope listeners enjoy this conversation and really just take your insight and wisdom and passion. I can just tell through the screen that you're so passionate about this. So go check out her stuff. She's really amazing. And go Texas.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Surthriving. I hope you took some helpful information away from it and are feeling inspired. If you know someone who is surviving or thriving and would benefit from hearing this episode, feel free to send it over to them. Remember, sharing is caring. To leave a review or rating of the show, head to Spotify to follow, rate, and let me know what you think. All information about today's episode, guest, and podcast social handles will be in the description, so don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date.